Hello and welcome to Autocar and welcome to a twin test of two of our favourite sports cars of the moment. Ilya, what do you have there?
I have the Lotus Emira Turbo SE, which is the 400 horsepower version of the 2-litre turbo.
And I've got an Alpine A110 in its kind of base form, which is pretty much our favourite version of our favourite sports car of the past few years. Stay tuned. And this is the Alpine A110. There are a few different A110 variants, including the GTS and the R, but this regular version, at around £55,000 and with 248 brake horsepower, well, we've always loved it. It's not as fast as the Lotus, of course, but its diminutive size and aluminium construction with just a 1.8 litre engine means it only weighs 1,102 kilos at the curb. What, though, is it like to drive? So this is the inside of the Alpine A110. Welcome. It is a pleasing interior, I think. It's getting slightly familiar now. This car has been out for a long time, actually. We're towards the end of its life cycle. But I like it no less for the fact that there is a familiarity to it. The driving position is good. I'm sitting ever so slightly high. These seats can be lowered, but only if you get busy with a socket set and one of those kind of Torx heads attachments. You can drop it a little lower, you can put it a little higher than this. I don't really think you'd need to have it higher. Steering wheel reaches a long way towards me. It's round enough, which I like. The paddles are attached to the column, which I also like. Switchgear is good, simple, straightforward. There is a touch screen, but actually most of the controls, like the HVAC and all of the main driving controls, are all done by proper actual real buttons. It's got a small boot behind the engine. Doesn't get as hot, I don't think, as the Lotus, which has a larger boot back there. But Illya will tell you more about the Lotus. This is the Turbo SE version of the Lotus then, which means it has 400 horsepower, the same as the V6, driving through an 8-speed twin-clutch gearbox. Now, Lotus wasn't originally going to bring the Turbo SE to the UK, but has since seen the error of its ways. The Emira is a mid-engined rear-wheel drive car with an aluminium chassis beneath composite bodywork. It weighs around 1,500 kilos, a bit less dry weight, a bit more at the curb. But Illya will have more tech details with his driving impressions. It's around £90,000, by the way.
Let me tell you the tale of the 4-cylinder Lotus Emira. It launched with the V6 because that was just a carryover from the Evora, pretty much. So pretty easy to develop. But there was the promise of a cheaper base model with a 4-cylinder. That was delayed, and when it came, it was actually kind of expensive and a bit underwhelming. Because that engine, the 4-cylinder Mercedes A45 engine, basically, is an expensive engine. The trouble was, it has 360 horsepower, it was pretty fast, but the gearbox was a bit weird, sounded a bit like a vacuum cleaner. That was about 2 years ago, and in the meantime, Lotus have had time and experience to develop it further. They've found a way to make the gearbox behave more naturally while still making it pass emissions, because that was kind of the limiting factor, and that's a big thing in modern cars. They found a way to get a bit more power out of the engine. I mean, it made more power in the A45 anyway, but it's never been used in a mid-engined application like this. I think they've probably become more comfortable with the idea that the 4-cylinder is now just as powerful as the 6-cylinder. So it's now got 400 horsepower instead of 360, and that's just as much as the V6. Because let's face it, people aren't buying the V6 because they want the fastest one. They buy the V6 because they want the V6, they want the sound, they want the engagement, they want the manual gearbox.
Just one big push of the D button for the gear shift takes it from automatic into manual, and then it will stay that way. If you do a manual override when it's in auto, it gives you manual shifts for a while, but then if you haven't pushed a paddle, it'll divert back into auto, as most automatic gearboxes do. You can feel that this car does not weigh very much. Just in the way that you accelerate, it doesn't need much to get going. What do you think of this engine? It's a 4-cylinder, it drives through this twin clutch auto gearbox. Have a listen. If I put it into sport mode, don't know if you can hear that, it's very subtle.
a little bit of sort of fake crackle and pop on the overrun. As Illya said, it's like somebody's in the engine bay, just knocking gently to try and get out. But it's an effective powertrain rather than a really endearing, engaging powertrain.
This Turbo SE, you can still get a normal turbo with 360 horsepower, which is a bit cheaper, but this Turbo SE is £90,000, and that's a lot of money. To some extent, you can tell it feels like a more expensive car than the Alpine. I really like this interior. It's got lots of nice soft leather, Alcantara, real metal for these speaker grills. It feels like a really high quality cabin, which is not something you could ever say from a Lotus before the Emira. So then what about that engine? As you can hopefully hear, it still sounds like an angry vacuum cleaner. There's purpose to it. It doesn't sound strained, it sounds up for it. It's not an exciting, beautiful noise in any way. The gearbox is a definite improvement. Remember, this is all software, the hardware hasn't changed, but arguably the software is just as important as the hardware. When you leave it in auto, it generally behaves like a decent automatic gearbox. It can be a little bit clunky at low speed and sometimes hang on to a gear a bit too long, but it's, you know, it just fades into the background, and like I said, there's no clutch pedal to worry about. When you take control with the paddles, very easy to do, just pull a paddle and that locks it into manual mode. It responds mostly instantly. Compared to the Alpine, there's a very slight delay to pulling a paddle in the gear going home, but in isolation you don't really notice. You can also use the gear lever, which is clearly a Volvo part, to change gear, although it's slightly weird. You push it left and right to go up and down. And almost forget the most important thing. It is really fast. In general terms, it's not a heavy car, it's quite a light car. And with 400 horsepower, once it comes on boost, it's properly quick. When you get stuck into some corners, it's still a proper Lotus. The defining feature is the steering. This is one of the only road cars still available with hydraulic power steering. It's basically this and a McLaren, and the steering feels quite like a McLaren. The steering is quite heavy for a modern car. It's got this very oily, meaty feel to it. When you're just going somewhere, it can be a bit much because it tramlines and writhes around in your hands a lot, so you have to have your hands on the wheel and not doze off. But when you're on a road like this, it really gives you confidence, because you kind of implicitly feel everything that's going on. You just have confidence in the car. You know that it's gonna stick when you think it's gonna stick. And there are lots of extra kind of buzzes and vibrations and bits of feedback that aren't necessarily critical to, you know, guiding a car down the road, but just does make you feel involved in a way that most modern cars don't. The handling balance, though, is very different from the Alpine, even though they are both four-cylinder, mid-engined sports cars. This feels a lot more serious. It feels a lot more keyed in, tied down. It feels like it has a lot more grip, frankly. It feels like you have to go a lot faster before it really comes alive, which I suppose is a choice. Some people don't enjoy the flighty feel of the Alpine, but it's still a proper sports car. It feels properly adjustable once you really go for it. If you back off into a corner, it'll come around, and obviously there's enough power to kick the back out of a tight corner. It doesn't have a limited slip differential, but clearly there must be some traction control stuff doing torque vectoring by braking, mimicking a limited slip differential.
But the powertrain has never been the real star of the show when it comes to the Alpine. The star of the show has always been the way that this car rides and handles. And it's a car that we sometimes talk about a 50-metre test. and engineers do as well when they sort of develop a car. You get in it, you drive at 50 metres. How does it feel during those first very crucial moments as you start rolling? And this car feels tremendous, and it always has, and it still does. It has a suppleness that you sort of very rarely get in sports cars. There's no harshness to it. It rolls with a real ease. It sort of breathes over bumps. There are a few manufacturers who do it well. One of them happens to be Lotus. The other, it would appear, happens to be Alpine. You can really feel the sort of fleetness of foot, and this car is a very lightweight car. The steering is quite light, very precise, very accurate. This is not a sort of stable high-speed autobahn sort of car. Do you know what I mean? It instead excels on kind of twisty roads like this, where only a little bit of effort on the steering wheel starts to get the nose guiding from point to point. It kind of feels like it's turning around its middle. There are some sports cars that are a bit beefy, they're a bit hot roddy. If you were driving a big sort of front-engined rear-wheel drive car through these sort of twisting turns, you sort of turn in on the brakes a bit to settle the nose, get back on the power a bit, and you would feel the power just kind of straightening the car. You don't need to do any of that with this. You can just sort of guide the car with your fingertips or your palms, and it just turns and breathes and moves so effortlessly, so easily. It's just really joyful, right? Just really joyful. Because of the way roads are these days, quite busy with traffic, quite busy with people who've got dash cams. You may as well assume you're on camera, because there's a very strong chance you will be. You come up here to Wales, there are sheep by the side of the road, so you can't go fast anyway. And what this car does is it talks to you, and it's enjoyable at all speeds. And it's an absolute joy to drive. It feels, if anything, sort of more Lotus-y than the Lotus, if you like. So Illya and I have both driven the other's cars back to back, if you like, and I've got to chat to him about it, but I suspect we will be in broad agreement that this is just such a delight to drive.
In the end, it does come down to that price. This feels like a more expensive car than the Alpine. It doesn't feel £35,000 more expensive. This feels like a sort of £65,000, £70,000 car. And at that level, it would be really compelling. At 90, or actually 100 with some options, it's very hard to justify when there are still the Cayman and the Alpine. When those are gone next year, maybe it'll be a different story. It's just overpriced. Lovely car, but overpriced.
Okay, so Illya, you've driven, I've driven. What do you think is the best of the two sports cars here?
Quite simply, it's the Alpine. I do like the Lotus, I really like it. It's nice to drive, and it does feel like a more expensive car because of the interior, because of power, but not to quite the difference to the price of that. And actually, even if they were the same price, that is just nicer to drive. It feels actually much more like a Lotus. It feels smaller, lighter, more on its toes, doing more with less. It's just more fun to drive.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the Lotus, but I just prefer the Alpine. So we have a unanimous verdict. The Alpine A110 is still the best small sports car you can have. Thank you for joining the two of us. We're here at YouTube every week at least. We're also over at autocar.co.uk all the time, and you can find Autocar on the newsstands as it has been weekly since 1895. Thank you so much for joining us. We'd love it if you'd subscribe to the channel, like this video. See you next time.